Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make a super cool desktop microbiome in Unreal Engine 5 using completely free assets and some modeling tools that are built right into Unreal. So let's get started. First things first, let's go ahead and download a couple assets that we're going to need. These are free assets and I'll leave links in the description down below. But let's head over to the Unreal Marketplace and you're going to need to search for Animal Variety Pack. Let's go ahead and download that. It's a free animal pack with animations. Great. Next, let's head on over to PolyHaven so we can get a couple HDRIs that we might want. I'm personally going to use this one here for the project, but you can use whatever you'd like. Next, let's go ahead and create a new project. So we're going to choose Games, Third Person, and we're going to turn on ray tracing. So our final image, we're actually going to use path tracing. So you do need an RTX card to achieve this. However, if you decide you want to use Lumen, you can do that. We're just going to have to change up some of the glass materials later. Now, before we go any further, we're going to go ahead and enable some plugins. So go to Settings, Plugins, and we're going to search for HDRI. Let's go ahead and make sure HDRI backdrop is enabled. And we also need to enable the modeling plugin. So just make sure that's turned on, modeling tools editor mode. And it's probably going to ask you to restart. So go ahead and restart it. Now let's go ahead and do File, New Level, and let's just start with a empty level. Before we do anything else, let's go ahead and create our HDRI, get some lighting in here. So go up top, go to Lights and HDRI Backdrop, and this will give us the default HDRI. Let's go ahead and create a plane so we can have a working surface. So go up here, Shapes, and Plane, and you'll notice that you're not going to see it. That is because of the position of the HDRI. So let's click on our HDRI here, and we're just going to set this all to 0. And then on our z-axis, we're actually going to drop this down to -500. So the best way I've discovered to create these little microbiomes is to basically take everything at actual size except for the actual container, the glass ball or whatever you're going to use. We're going to scale that up super big so everything else is all normal size except for the container. This helps us to be able to get really good kind of shallow depth of field, similar to a tilt shift kind of effect. So what I want to do now is I'm going to make sure my plane is nice and centered. Let's set that at 0, 0, 0. And I am going to go into my content browser. We are going to go under Characters, Mannequins, Meshes, and we are going to drop in our mannequin here. This is going to give us really good scale reference so we can do the rest of the work. Now let's click on our plane and let's scale up our working plane here because we know we're going to need plenty of space. Let's just set that, let's set it to about 15 all across the board there. Let's start to create our container sphere. So we're just going to do kind of a real simple glass ball with a stand. So let's head on over to modeling section here. And we're going to click on sphere. And what we're going to do is we're going to check the radius. So that's definitely too small. I want to say 200 is probably going to be about right. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So 200. Let's go ahead and set the subdivisions as far up as we can. We want this to be as high poly as possible within reason because it's going to be glass. So we want to make sure we get proper reflections and refractions and everything like that. So let's go ahead and click on that and make sure it's per face. And we want to make sure the pivot location is in the center, not at the base. This is going to be easier for us to scale down, do some cutouts, some bowl meshes. All right, let's go ahead and click. That will create it. And what it's going to do is try to create another one. So let's just press escape. And that's going to give us our one created sphere here. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and get the sphere into position. So we're going to move Manny out of the way here. We could probably actually delete him now that we have our size. So let's center up our sphere, 0, 0, 0. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to move it up. But let's turn on snapping. Let's go to tens for movement, and what we're going to do is kind of slightly position it a little bit higher than what we don't want it on the ground because we're going to create like a cool little stand to kind of hold it. I think that looks pretty good. What is that? That's about 240 on the z-axis with our pivot point in the middle. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and let's Control C and Control V to copy our sphere. And we're going to scale this one down. Let's go with 0.98 across the board. And what that's going to do is we're going to use this inner sphere to cut out the outer sphere. That way our glass is actually going to have some thickness to it. So now what we do is we click in our outliner. Let's click on the first sphere, then hold Control and click on our second sphere. So now we have both of them selected. Over here in the Modeling tab, we're going to go under Poly Model and we're going to select Mesh Bool. And what that's going to do is it's actually going to cut out the inside of that sphere and give us some thickness. You're not going to actually see it right away, so that's okay. Let's just press accept. Now that we have cut out our inside of our sphere, we need to create another object. Let's head on over to box, and what we need to do is we need to size this box up so it's going to cover the entire sphere. So let's just take our width up to 450, depth to 450, and our height at 200 should be good. Let's go ahead and set our subdivisions all the way up for both the width, depth, and on our height we could probably do about 50 or so in the middle. And what we're going to do is go ahead and drop that into our scene and then press escape. Now let's center up our box again, 0, 0, 0. And what we're going to do is we're going to move this up and kind of get an idea of where we want to cut the top of our glass, because we want an open top kind of glass bowl or vase for our microbiome. I'd like to bring it up just a little bit so that the curve starts to come back inward a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and click on our sphere and let's grab our box, Control or Shift to select our box. Let's head over to Mesh Bool again. And then now you can see this is a good example. So it's going to give you a preview of what it's going to look at. And you can see we have some thickness here because we actually subtracted the inside of that sphere before doing this. I think that looks pretty cool. So let's go ahead and accept. Now what we're going to do is create a cool little wooden stand to hold our glass sphere. And so let's head back to box and we're going to choose 150 by 50 depth and 100 height. I think that's going to look pretty good for us there. Yep. So let's go ahead and drop that into our scene. And let's center that up again. 0, 0, 0. And you can always press the little arrow next to it to center it all up. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and copy this and paste it real quick. And with your snapping on, let's just turn it 90 degrees because we're going to want 2 of these. And let's go ahead and hide our original sphere here, our bowl. Now that we have our little stand or legs here, let's go ahead and create another sphere. And we're going to create it the same size as our original one. So it should already be set up. Let's just click it into scene to make a new one. Let's go ahead and click the little arrow here on our location. That's going to center it up in our scene. And then let's move it on up and let's go about maybe one more. Yeah, about 230 on the x-axis. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this to cut out a little slot in our wood stand. So what we need is to go ahead and copy and paste this or duplicate it, whichever one you want to do. Let's just move it to the side because we're going to need 2 of these. Because each time you do the mesh bowl cut, it kind of gets rid of that original object. So let's select one of our leg pieces and the sphere that's centered up. And let's do our mesh bowl. And you can see it's going to cut that out for us. Perfect. Now let's take our copied sphere, move it back into the middle. We did that at 230. There it is. Select our leg and our sphere. Mesh bowl again. And go ahead and accept. We could combine these 2 objects, but I'm not going to. You may decide you want to reposition it or change it later. Now there's one more key object we need to create to put in our scene that we're going to create inside the modeling tools of Unreal. And that is going to be our soil, our dirt in the bottom of our biome. So let's go ahead and go back to sphere again. And let's go ahead and place that in our scene. Let's center that up. And what we're going to do is, if you remember when we had our original sphere and then we did a 0.98 scaling on it to cut out the inside of it, what we're going to do is we're actually going to take it to 0.97. which is going to be just a little bit inside of the glass bowl, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to displace this mesh a little bit, and that's going to give it some depth and some actual texture to it. So now that we have that, so what I'm going to go ahead and do now is create another box, and we want to make sure this encompasses the entire sphere. We're going to use this to cut out again, so 450, 450, and 200. No, let's actually make that 450 also. We're just going to position it. So a full square there. And let's set this position of that to 0. And let's start to move it up. I'm going to want about, let's say about that much dirt there inside of our microbiome. Let's go down actually a couple more. So let's select our sphere for our dirt and the new box. Let's do another mesh bool on it again and accept it. Now that we've created all of our objects that we're going to need, let's head on over to Quixel Bridge. So come on up here and click on Quixel Bridge, and we are going to go ahead and snap it in there. And make sure, of course, you are logged in. So inside of Quixel Bridge, we're going to go ahead and snag probably about 4 textures or so here. We need one for our soil, one for our wood stand. We're probably going to do another wood piece for our flooring, and we're probably going to get some imperfections for our glass. So I already have these downloaded, but let's head on over here and I'll show you which ones I picked out specifically for the textures. I'm going to be using this flaky painted wooden planks here. This is going to be our floor that our vase is going to be sitting on. I'm also going to be using these wooden planks here. That's going to be for our stand that's holding the microbiome. And I'm going to be using the potting soil here. That'll be our dirt. And last but not least, if you go under the imperfections category here, I'm going to be using this fingerprints imperfections as possible fingerprints on top of the glass surface, just to give it a little bit more realism. Let's go ahead and switch back into select mode. This way we can get a bigger view of what we're working on. Let's pull up our content browser. We're going to browse to Megascans and surfaces there. And make sure you use your filters. It's always an easy way of accomplishing a lot inside the content browser without having to dive deep into all your folders. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Material Instance here. I know I'm going to be using this wooden planks for our surface for the stand and our potting soil here. So let's go ahead and drop that onto our dirt and our potting soil. That's looking pretty good there. Before we get too far, let's go ahead and start naming some of our objects here so we can come back to them easily. Let's click on our dirt. Let's go ahead and name that dirt. Let's click on our stand. We're going to name that stand. And we have our second piece of stand. Let's just gonna give it the same name. And then we don't have our glass visible at the moment, so let's just unhide it. We know that's going to be our glass. Perfect. Let's go ahead and hide it back again because we don't need it quite yet. Now, let's go ahead and click on our dirt and let's go back into the modeling tab. Now that we've added a texture to this, what we're going to do is most Megascans textures come with a displacement property in the texture. So we're going to use that to displace our soil so it gives it a little bit more realism. What we'll do now is head on over to under Deform, there is Displace. Let's go ahead and pick Displace here. And at first it's going to look super weird just because this is a purling noise, which actually can work in some situations. However, we know our texture has a displacement in it, so we're going to change displacement type to Texture 2D Map. Now, under Displacement Map, we have a spot where we can enter our potting soil. So let's go to our content browser and let's turn off our filter, go to our potting soil folder, and it's always in the packaged texture here at the end. This is your diffuse or albedo, this is your normal, and this is a packaged texture using different layers. So let's go ahead and drag and drop that into our map. And I know offhand that it is the blue channel that is the displacement channel. So let's change the channel to blue. And you're going to notice here that all of a sudden it's going to begin to displace this based on the texture. Now it's not a whole lot at the moment, just a little bit. So let's go ahead, let's see if we can crank this up a little bit. Let's set it about 20. That's starting to look a little bit better. You might be able to go a little bit more, but sometimes you get kind of jaggedy edges here. Let's go ahead and accept that. Depending on how high res the model is or how many times you've told it to subdivide during the displacement, this can take a little bit, so just give it a little bit of time. At this point, if you want to, you can actually do the same thing with your wood stand. You could actually apply a displacement based off of the properties of the actual texture. We're not going to do that. However, I am going to show you one other quick little thing that you can do. Under the modeling tab, you go down to Xform UV, and you can actually choose individual sides of your geometry here and change the actual UVs. So let's rotate that. We want it to actually look like the wood is traveling the same direction a little bit there. Otherwise it's kind of going sideways. So click accept. Let's go back to Xform UV. Actually, we need to select our model, Xform UV, select the top again. Let's just do a quick little rotate on it. Perfect, and accept. Now what we need to do is go ahead and get our dirt in the correct position because it's probably not lined up with our glass sphere at the moment. But what we need to do is go ahead and create our glass material. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a glass material that's going to work for us within Lumen at the moment. Because when we go to do path tracing, we're actually going to modify the glass so that it works a little bit better in path tracing and gives us better reflections, better refractions, everything. But we're going to go ahead and make it for Lumen now so that we can still kind of function and move around within the editor. Let's go ahead and get out of modeling mode, back to select. Let's go into our content browser and let's go under our main content. Let's go to, you can create a new folder, call it materials. I have one here already. And what I'm going to do is I have the glass here, but I'm going to show you how I have it set up. So let's right click, go new material. And we're just going to call it glass. I'm going to call it glass 2 since I already have one. Let's go ahead and double click that. Let's snap it in here. Now what we're going to do is we are going to create a few different elements here. And like I said, we're going to set it up for Lumen first, but then we'll change it a little bit later for path tracing. However, what we want to do first is click on a blank area. We're going to come over here to blend mode and choose translucent. And let's scroll down. And under lighting mode, we're actually going to change this to surface forward shading. Now, let's hold V and left click in the middle here. This is going to be our color here. So let's just call it color. And we're just going to tag that into our base color. We're going to leave it black because that tends to work best with glass. You can change it if you decide to later. We need to add a few constants here. So we're going to hold the number 1 and click, left click on those. Let's go ahead and tag this one into opacity and this one here into refraction. So we can go ahead and let's turn these, right click on them, convert to parameter, and right click, convert to parameter. Let's go ahead and give it a name. So this is refraction amount. And this one will be our opacity amount. We're also going to need one more. So hold down 1 and left click again, convert to parameter. And we're going to call this roughness amount. But for the roughness, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and tie in our imperfections of fingerprints so that it gives it a little bit more detail later on. Let's head on over to our content browser again. We're going to go under Megascans, Surfaces again, and our fingerprints here. Let's go in there. And this is what we're going to do is we're going to drag in our texture here. So on imperfections, the actual texture I'll show you here. If we double click on that and open it, and we can hide all the different colored layers here. So we need to know which colored layer is actually carrying our fingerprints. So it's not blue, it's not green. Well, there is some detail in green, but that's not what we want. Let's go to red. Perfect. That is actually the channel that we need to use. Let's go ahead and close that. And so from the red channel, let's drag out here and let go. We are going to create a multiply node. And for the B section, we're actually going to tie in our roughness amount into B and then tie that into our actual roughness. So to set this up for Lumen first, in our roughness here, I'm going to go ahead and set a default value of about 0.15. For our opacity, I'm going to go ahead and set that to 0.3 so that we can see it a little bit easier. And our refraction amount, we're just going to set that to 1. We don't want crazy refraction during this period because it's going to be a lot easier to see stuff. So let's go ahead and save that material. Once it finishes compiling, let's head back to our level here. Let's zoom out a little bit and let's show our glass. So you can see here how the soil isn't quite lined up. So what we're going to do is take our glass portion here, go to our content browser, and we're going to drag in our glass on top of our actual mesh. Perfect. Now we can see we get a little bit of glass. Lumen does an okay job, but we're going to change this. We're going to get much better glass later in the project. Now what we can do is we can go to our front view so that we can actually line up our dirt a little bit better. So up here, click on perspective. Let's go to front view. Now you can use your scroll wheel to zoom in just a little bit. We're going to take and click on our dirt. And now we can kind of move our dirt up just a little bit. I still have snapping on, and I think that's actually perfect. It was probably down just by just a little bit there. Let's go back to our perspective, and yep, you can see there's a faint line right here from the thickness of our glass. All right, let's add some life to this thing. So let's head back over into Quixel Bridge. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the assets that I chose, but of course you can choose whatever you want from here. I personally chose under plants, I'm going to choose the wild grass, which is this one here. Wild grass is a pretty decent little set. It's got a lot of variations in it, works pretty well. I'm also going to be picking the blackberry. I like that. It's kind of a little bit of a smaller bush, not too big, not too small. And under their new boxwood section here, there's actually a tree in there. Of course, you can get trees from anywhere. So you could use the Megascan's actual tree plugin that you get off, or not plugin, but the Unreal Marketplace asset that you can get. But we're just going to go with a simple one here. So the boxwood trees, the blackberry bushes, and the wild grass assets here. I also want to add some rocks into the scene, so I chose this mossy rocks asset here that I'm going to go ahead and add in. So before we actually start adding our foliage, let's go ahead and hide our glass. It's going to make it a little bit easier to position stuff. So hide our glass. I know for sure I'm going to want one tree in the middle, probably a single or a couple rocks in there. And then the foliage, we're actually going to paint the grass and the little bushes. So let's hop into our content browser. Let's go under Megascans and 3D assets. I know here is my mossy rock. I'm going to go ahead and drag that into my scene for now. Let's go back to our content browser. Let's go under 3D plants under the Megascans folder. And let's go to boxwood. That's where our tree is going to be. They got a couple different ones here. I kind of like this one, so I'm going to pick that one in the scene. Now what we need to do is we're going to want to scale this up. Let's just take it up by 5x for now and position that 0, 0. Let's position our mossy rocks here. If you need to, go ahead and turn off snapping temporarily while you move some stuff around with a little more accuracy. Let's just kind of roughly drop that into our soil, position it there for now. That's going to work. That looks pretty good. Now let's start painting our grass and bushes. Let's head on over to the foliage mode and pull up our content browser, Megascans folder, 3D plants, and wild grass. I'm going to go ahead and select all of these static meshes, drag them into our foliage folder here. And let's just kind of give it a shot here. Our paintbrush, make sure your paintbrush is pretty small. It might start out pretty big. And let's just kind of test it. And you know, that's already looking pretty good, but we need to give it some variation. So with our foliage selected, Control A to select all, let's give it some variations. Let's go from 0.5 to 1.0. That's going to be pretty decent. Density at 100 seems to be looking pretty good. Let's start to paint that in there again. Yep, much better, much better. Looks good. Make our brush a little bit smaller for when we get around some of these detailed spots. We don't want to paint on top of our rocks. One thing you really need to be careful with is not to get too close to the edge, because we don't want our glass. One thing to be careful of is not to get too close to the edge, because our grass will start poking through our glass vase and we don't want that. So let's just kind of keep it nice and a little bit on the inside, not too close to the edge, because you don't want those grass pieces poking all the way through. It's not going to look good when your glass piece has grass coming through it. Let's just keep painting. Let's take our brush up just a little bit there. All right, that should fill it in. Now let's head back over here and Control A, make sure everything's selected. We're going to uncheck it. Let's go back to our content browser. Let's add those other little bushes in there, something with a little more detail. So under our 3D plants folder, we're going to choose the blackberry. And this has got a pretty good variety, so let's take all of those and drag and drop them into our foliage. Let's select all and uncheck, and let's just make sure that we only have these guys selected here on the blackberry. So we'll select those, click on the checkbox, and let's go from 0.3 to 0.6. And we might need to change the density, but let's check a little bit here. You know, that's not too bad. Let's just kind of gonna paint a few around here. Don't want to go too crazy with the bigger like bushes, gonna take up too much space. And you know, that looks pretty good. A lot of variation, a little bit of color differences. Perfect. Now, last but not least, for the inside of our microbiome, I want to add a little character or a little animal inside of there. So let's head back over to the select mode, go to our content browser, and go to our main content folder, and there should be a folder called Animal Variety Pack asset that you downloaded and added to your project. Let's go ahead, we're going to pick the fox. So go into the fox under meshes, and let's go ahead and drag and drop the skeletal mesh for the fox. That's going to give us a little bit of scale. We can take them up if we desire to take them up a little bit bigger. Actually, let's do that. Let's take them up to about 1.5. I think it's going to be cool. We don't want just a plain looking fox here. So what we want to do is we actually want to give them a pose. So all of these animals actually come with some animations. So click on the fox. Let's go to our detail panel. We're going to change animation mode from use animation blueprint to use animation asset. And then in this drop down here under anim to play, you can literally see all the different animations that come with it. Pretty cool little setup here. Let's just select the bite animation. Now you're going to notice it's going to change the pose a little bit here, but it's not really doing anything. So just underneath there, you can see initial position. So you can take that and you can actually scroll through and actually get our biting animation here, our full bite attack animation. So I don't know if let's have them in the air just for fun. One thing we need to do is we need to make sure we turn off looping and playing, because we don't want it to actually play during rendering. Okay, now let's zoom on out and take a look here. It's looking pretty cool. Let's go ahead and turn on our glass real quick just to make sure. And you can see our tree seems to be intersecting just a little bit. We can select that and just move it just a little bit out of the way. Perfect like that. None of our grass seems to be poking through or anything like that. So what I want to do now is actually create a floor for this. We're going to get rid of this plane here, but let's add a floor first. So under the modeling section, let's go to box again. I believe this we're probably going to want to make fairly big. So let's take this up to probably about 3000 by 3000 by 20 is going to work perfect. Yep, looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and place that. And let's center that up. And we can click on our plane and our outliner here and go ahead and delete that for now. Let's head back on over to our select section, open up our content browser. Let's go back to our Megascans folder and under surfaces. And we're going to go ahead and take our flaky painted wood here. Let's add that on there. Nice, that's a nice little wood deck, kind of like tabletop or something. It's going to look really good. But what we want to do is add a little bit more detail to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and displace this just like we did with the soil. So let's select our floor, go back to modeling again. Once in the modeling section, let's go ahead and click on under mesh ops. We're going to go to remesh. we want to see how many polys we actually got going on here, because sometimes we need to add a little bit more before we actually displace it. So it looks like we've got about 80,000. You know, we're going to set that to probably about 500,000. It's going to calculate a little bit here. It might take a little bit of time. Okay, this is a lot of polys, but this is going to give us a lot of nice little fine detail. So go ahead and press accept once it's calculated the remesh. The remesh might take a little bit, but just give it some time. Let's click back on our object again. Now let's go to Displace again. And we're going to want to make sure we drag in our actual displacement for this particular texture. So make sure you go to your content folder. Once the remesh is completed, let's head over on into displacement again. And we're going to want to go ahead and make sure that we go ahead and put our flaky wood texture on there. So right now you can see it's a little wonky, just a little too deep there. So make sure we add that in there. Let's set our displacement to maybe about 10. Maybe it's still a little too much. Let's take that down to about 5. Perfect. That's just going to give us just a little bit of texture to it, so it's not just a flat surface for our shadows. Go ahead and accept that. So this is really starting to look good, but we can take this up a notch. So instead of using Lumen, we're going to go ahead and use path tracing. You definitely need an RTX card for this, but it's going to give us much better lighting and much better glass. So first, let's go back to our select mode and let's create ourselves a camera. So click under there, go under cinematic and create a cinematic camera. Let's go ahead and set our positioning for that. And a quick little tip, when you have a camera selected in your outliner and it's not the camera that you're viewing, it'll pop up a little window here and you can actually pin that to your view. This is a great way to be able to change your camera in the world space and still be able to preview of what it actually sees. So what I'm going to do is we're going to set up a few variables here so that our camera is going to look really good, give it some shallow depth of field. So with our camera selected, let's go to our details panel here. There's several things that we're going to want to change. Let's go under the lens settings and under minimum f-stop, I'm just going to set this to 0. Now we're not going to be using 0, but I just want it as low as I can possibly get for now. Under focus settings, scroll down a little bit more and under actual current focal length, I want to set this to 100. This is going to give us some nice shallow depth of field once we add our aperture in there. So on our aperture, let's just set this to 1.2 for now. So you can see we're already starting to get a little bit of a blurriness going on. So let's zoom out or move our camera out just a little bit here, about like that. Set our angle. Perfect. Now we've got the entire thing in frame. Now in our editor view here, we're going to zoom in on our actual microbiome. And under focus settings in the detail panel for our camera, we're going to choose manual, make sure manual is selected. We're going to show our focus plane. And now what we're going to do is this is going to give us a purple focus plane that we can actually see. So it's going to tell us where we're actually focusing on. So you're going to start being able to move this and you're going to see that plane come across. I want to make sure we're focused probably right about in the middle of our microbiome. You could choose the fox if you wanted to, or the tree or something of that sort. Let's turn off that. So now we have a nice shallow focus plane. There's one other thing we need to do under our camera. So let's go ahead in the details panel. Let's search for path because we're going to be using path tracing. And we want to make sure we turn on reference depth of field. That's going to be very important. Very quickly, what I'm going to go ahead and do is let's go to our content browser, and you're going to want to go ahead and add that HDRI that I linked in the description. So wherever you may have dragged or dropped that into your project, I have it under my materials folder. So let's go ahead and select the HDRI backdrop in our outliner, and let's just drag and drop that into the actual cube map. I want more of that indoor interior kind of look. So that's going to give us much better lighting. As you can see, our lighting has actually changed within our camera view. So we're going to go ahead and set a manual exposure on that. So let's click on our camera. We're going to scroll all the way down to the lens setting under exposure. We're going to check on metering mode, set that to manual, and exposure compensation. I think we're probably, it looks like 7 is probably about the right amount there. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and change the size of our HDRI. So let's click on that. We're going to make it a little bit bigger, probably about 500 or so. That's going to adjust our lighting, so we might need to adjust our exposure a little bit again. All right, now let's go ahead and hop into our camera. So go under perspective and choose our camera. Now let's go ahead and switch to actual path tracing. So come up here to lit, and we're going to change that to path tracing. So you're going to notice it's going to start to calculate and do the paths, and our glass looks horrible and our foliage has disappeared. No worries, we're going to fix it. First thing we need to do is fix the foliage. For some reason, with our camera and path tracing at this distance, the culling causes it to disappear. So there's a real simple command that you're going to type into the console, and this is going to fix that. I'll leave that down in the description below. Just copy and paste it in there. Unfortunately, you'll have to do it each time you open up the project, but this is about the only fix that you can do for now. I have that command. I'm going to go ahead and click it and paste it into here, and you're going to start to see that slowly our trees and foliage are actually going to start coming back into the scene. A good way to switch it and make it go a little bit faster, let's switch back to Lumen and then go back into path tracing again. You might even need to step back into the editor view and then back into your camera just to get it to start to come in. Now let's fix the glass. Let's go ahead and open up our glass texture here. And what we're going to do is we are going to change two simple variables here. We're going to select on our opacity amount. I'm going to change that to 0.1, and under our refraction is 1.5. Go ahead and save. Now when you switch back, you're going to see that now your glass is starting to give off some proper refractions, some proper reflections and everything, looking so much better in the path tracer. So there you have it, a really cool mini microbiome that you can create in Unreal Engine completely with free assets and just the modeling tools within inside Unreal Engine. It's super easy, doesn't take much time, and comes out looking really, really good. I hope you guys liked the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It's kind of a little bit different. This is a guide on how to do something like this. I'll post some pictures of a microbiome I did for a weekly challenge, which a lot of people were interested in how I made it. So that's why I made this tutorial on how to create something similar to that. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hit the thumbs up, like the video, comment, share. If you have any questions, please put them down below and I'll see if I can answer them for you. And until next time, peace out.